Hey guys, it's Godbars here, the self-proclaimed hip-hop historian, and this is the 196th episode of my series where I grab a vinyl from my collection, talk about why I love it, what influence it has, and what its place is in the grand scheme of hip-hop. So finally, we've made it back around to another set of classics from the late 1980s to early 1990s. As if you recall from my last group of Golden Age reviews, I started including some LPs that came out in 1990 or 1991. Considering I have such an endless amount of awesome LPs to share from that decade, I also made that decision based on the fact that the term Golden Age in hip hop most commonly refers to the stretch that began from the mid to late 80s up to the early or mid 90s. And there's no real reason to cut it off right at 1990 outside of that being our instinct. It's been a while now since I covered Eric and Parrish and their game-changing debut, Strictly Business, and while a lot of fans would probably choose the 1989 follow-up Unfinished Business as their second favorite pick, personally, I've always been a giant fan of their third album here, 1990's Business as Usual. They would continue this hot streak of LPs at least up until 1997's Back in Business, and you could even make an argument that it stretched past that, but today I want to focus on this album because, in my opinion, it's one of the more slept on releases in EPMD's storied discography. 1990 in general was sort of a weird year for hip hop, as there's without a doubt still a number of genre shifting classic debuts. There just understandably isn't the massive amount that would come in the following years. Some of my favorite albums that did come out in this transformative time included the debut LP by Intelligent Hoodlum, also known as Tragedy Gaddafi, Fear of a Black Planet by Public Enemy, A Tribe Called Quest with People's Instinctive Travels in the Paths of Rhythm, Ice Cube with America's Most Wanted, Brand Nubians One for All, DJ Polo and Cool G Rap's Wanted Dead or Alive, Sex Packets by Digital Underground, and Step in the Arena by Gangstar, though you'll occasionally see that one listed as a 1991 release. I feel like the jump from the 80s to the 90s was a kind of difficult time to navigate, as nobody was really sure exactly where this genre was going yet. This meant there was a decent amount of legends who may have thrived in the early years of rap music, but were hastily relegated to the outskirts during this kind of change of the guard. The thing with Eric and Parrish is they managed to camouflage for whatever challenge they happened to be faced with, and while albums like this one sometimes get overshadowed by their other more popular LPs, I think there's plenty of moments that keep business as usual sounding fresh and inspired even to this day, like the killer instrumental that opens the project up. Also, when you have a debut that's as influential and chock full of classic, game-changing moments as EPMD's first album, it's pretty hard to go out of style, considering they heavily inspired so many styles from artists that followed them. Sometimes I forget that not everyone is as familiar with some of these artists as another person, so it may be worth at least briefly going over some of the pivotal events in the duo's career as well as both of them as solo artists, starting with the infamous robbery. I'm not going to delve into this weird, unfortunate situation too much because, for one, it's insanely well known and there's nothing much more for me to say about it. But also, I don't really know all of the inner workings and politics of this drama. The gist of it, if you aren't aware, is in late 1991, Parrish Smith had his house broken into and subsequently burglarized by a group of masked men at gunpoint, and apparently right before the duo was scheduled to go on a giant tour, one of the apprehended culprits named Eric Sermon as the mastermind who had paid them to break in. I don't really know if it was confirmed past that, which is most likely due to Parrish refusing to actually file a police report, partially because this was a lifelong friend and partner that he trusted, so he assumed it must have all been a mistake and that they'd get it sorted out after they got back from the tour. The other reason is because this tour was for the entire hit squad and provided a massive opportunity for these newer comers like DOS Effects or Redman. After the situation with the robbery, there was understandably a lot of tension between the two, which was then added onto by E feeling like the money wasn't being divided up fairly. This resulted in their first breakup, where the group of artists that fell under the EPMD umbrella at the time were kind of forced to choose a side to stand with, as Eric formed the legendary Dep Squad with the likes of Redman, Keith Murray, Hurricane G, and Jamal, while Parrish retained the Hit Squad name, whose roster included K Solo, DOS Effects, Top Quality, and DJ Scratch. Both members would release solo LPs during this initial period of separation, but as you may expect, they couldn't really come close to the commercial or critical acclaim their work as a combined effort did. Many people assumed that this was the end of their legacy as a duo, but luckily they proved everyone wrong in 1997 when they shook the game with their return album Back in Business. But back to business as usual, I feel like their third album here keeps an impressive balance between a fun, light atmosphere and a more grimy, prototypical boom bap golden age hip hop record that still keeps an ear close to the streets. While it may not have had quite the level of impact or popularity that the first two classics did, I still personally love this LP and return to it all the time, and it sticks out from its predecessors with the guest appearances that range from brand new MCs just getting their foot in the door to established legends who were pretty much as big as you could get at the time. For example, this was actually Redman's introduction to the world, making his official debut here on two separate tracks. And suffice to say, he never looked back after this point, and kept pushing until he was a hip-hop superstar in his own right. Speaking of which, the one other MC featured on this album is actually LL Cool J, who at this point had already more than made a name for himself with his insanely successful first two studio albums. But then he too outdid himself this same year, releasing Mama Said Knock You Out in 1990 as well. The killer production on Business as Usual is handled by the usual suspects when it comes to EPMD releases, as the instrumentals are practically always handled in-house by the duo, mainly Eric to my knowledge, along with the iconic DJ Scratch. I'm gonna get my top 3 overall favorite songs out of the way first for this one, which would probably have to be I'm Mad, Underground, and Funky Piano. For honorable mentions that I still heavily enjoy and want to recommend, I have to shout out tracks like Gold Digger, Hardcore, Rampage, Jane 3, Mr. Bozak, Brothers on My Jock, Manslaughter, and For My People. Thank you for watching my 196th video. Next up, we have another top-tier Golden Age duo, so check for that one, and if you enjoyed, be sure to like, subscribe, and let me know what your favorite moments are off this somewhat underrated gem of an LP. Don't forget to have a great day, and I'll see you next time, okay? Alright.
Such a thing. Look, I stand in the flame of a feeling we call pain. Father's Day mug, little hand shaped in clay. Carrier planes flew overhead in pockets.